Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talkward. I am Marty Dundix, editor-in-chief of Weekly Humorous Magazine, and this is Talkward, a fun little show where professionally funny people come to tell awkward and cringeworthy stories. I'm very excited about today's guest. I was just so excited to ever get to meet him, and then I was lucky enough to have friends of friends, and he actually wrote something for Weekly Humorist, and it blew my mind, and I was so excited, and he's a legend in the comedy world. He has a couple of new projects coming up that we're going to talk about, but he's been a executive producer and showrunner and writer of The Simpsons for 35 years. He was a National Lampoon editor. He was at the Harvard Lampoon. He's a comedy legend. He's written for Carson. He's written for Gary Shandling. And I'm so happy to have him here today. Please welcome to the show, Mike Reiss, everybody. Hello, Mike Reiss. Welcome to Talkward.
Hello. I can only disappoint after an introduction like that.
I'm so happy to have you, and it's so nice to have become friends with you over the past couple of work. I'm not sure how many years it's been with COVID. It kind of feels like it's been like a decade, but it's probably only been like 6 months. But you were a writer for National Lampoon, and I worked for National Lampoon for like 13 years, and they did a documentary film. And when they put the documentary film together, that was put through by a Fourth Row Pictures with Doug Triola, and they did a great movie called Drunk Stone Brilliant Dead. And I was still at Lampoon when they were putting all that together, and we had a big premiere party, and it was so much fun. I got to meet so many incredibly huge comedic giants of National Lampoon, and you. But you were there, and you were so nice to me, and I was so thrilled to meet you. And you're just such a friendly, casual, genuinely nice person. So you weren't as intimidating as you ought to be for such a important comedic voice that you are. And you're just such a friendly person. And I'm so happy that I've gotten to work with you, because now we have a book out that we're going to talk about today called Santa's Brother Sandy Saves Christmas, which is one in a very long line of comedic children's books that you've written. And this is the newest one, and it's been illustrated by Jason Chatfield, who's a great, great artist. And people can buy it now. This is the hard copy, the hardback version that's out now too. And so let's just start off. Hello, nice to see you. Hello, Mike.
Hi,
Welcome.
good to see you. Yes, I do consider you a friend. And you'll see when you get to be my age, I'm in my 60s, you don't make friends anymore. You just sort of coast on all the old friends you've got. And it's always a nice surprise to make a new friend. And I count on you as someone to take care of me as I grow in firm.
Oh, good. I've gotten into that role. I'm actually kind of eyeing people like that myself. So my nieces and nephews, I'm being as nice and as an Uncle Marty as I possibly can be, because they have to take care of me when I'm old.
Yes.
And it's been nice getting to know you, and you're fun because you are someone who actually lives in Times Square. So we're both in New York City. I live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, where I've been for a very long time. And I would work in Midtown for a couple of different places. And I've had to commute in. When I worked at Letterman, it was 53rd and Broadway. When I worked at National Lampoon, it was around the corner in the Studio 54 building. But I'd always commute in. And when you and I met, and you were like, oh, you got to come to my place, and we're going to do this, I'm going to show you stuff, and we're going to record the thing here. And you lived in Times Square. And I was like, wow, you live in Times Square. I don't think I've ever met anyone that lives in Times Square before. That place is a circus. But you've lived there for a long time. And I thought that was so interesting. And what do you love about living in Times Square?
I love the insane convenience of it all. And I always tell this story that I needed a dentist. I had just moved to New York. It was like 17 years ago. And I have this very restrictive dental plan with the Writers Guild. So I asked Google, where is the nearest dentist on my dental plan? And Google said 75 feet away. And I didn't even know Google did that. And I called them, and they were closed. So I go, all right, what else you got? And they said, the next nearest one is 150 feet away. And it's all just like magic, especially I used to live in LA for 26 years, where everything is a giant inconvenience. And you you have to plan a trip to the store like weeks in advance. And I find myself still doing it here in New York, and it's pointless. I'll be thinking, oh, I really need a haircut. Gee, when can I fit that in? Blah, blah, blah. And the barber is, again, 35 feet away from me. I can just go there and get the haircut while I'm still thinking about my plan of attack.
That is the fun thing about New York, and we take it for granted so much, and anytime I leave, I always miss it. When I'm in New York, you're always kinda like, "Oh, this place is so dirty, there's piles of garbage everywhere, there's rats everywhere, there's just there," and then but you can do anything you want in a couple of blocks. You pretty
Yeah.
much get everything you need, and, like, I'll be walking out to go someplace else, and I'll pass my barber, and he's in the window cutting someone's hair, and he'll look at me, and I'll be like, "Oh, I'll be in today. 6? 6 good?" He's like, done." And that's it. That's the entire thing you need to plan to get a barber's appointment is you're walking by, you make eye contact, you're like, "I should get a haircut because he just saw me, and now I have to get a haircut. Like, if my hair is this long, he's gonna get mad."
Yeah.
That's kind of how I deal with all of my planning and things in the
This is why I think people in small towns are so boring. That's what they're thinking about all the time. When can I get my hair cut? When can I buy that squash? And we have time to think about it. We have time to write Broadway shows.
Yeah, and I mean, you where you live, you're right in where all of the Broadway shows are. You're constantly just walking by all the theaters. You can just pop right in. You and Denise can just go and do something immediately, and you go to functions. I was lucky enough to go to one of the plays that you wrote, and that was at what was the name of the theater that we went to that was so gorgeous Upper East Side?
The
Uh,
neighborhood
the
playhouse?
Neighborhood Playhouse, yeah. Neighborhood Playhouse, which is like a historic actors type studio type playhouse where everyone's like it's like a conservatory for all of this acting and all the different it's like and then you wrote a great play called it was, Shylock.
Shylock.
Shylock, and it was, the character from Shakespeare from The Merchant of Venice, and it was from his point of view,
Correct. It was
and
not.
it was fantastic, and you wrote this whole play, and then they performed the play, and it was so wonderful, and that kinda stuff it's just these little, projects that you pick up, like, you're this massively successful television comedy writer, and you've been on The Simpsons for a very long time. You created and wrote The Critic, which was an amazing, show, with, John Lovitz playing, a movie critic, and he would always say, "It stinks," and I loved that show so much too, and you've been able to dabble in so many other little things throughout your life. Um, how do you find interesting projects to occupy your time, even though you've achieved so much in the comedian and in the comedy writing world already? I mean, you've won so many Emmys.
Right.
You do a lot of stuff with movie features, Ice Age. You just kind of find stuff. How do you find projects that interest you after you've done so much already?
Well, it's funny. When I was 38, which is a long time ago, I thought I had enough money to last the rest of my life. I mean, in hindsight, I I had enough money to last me till I was about 42, but that seemed like the end of the road. And so I retired. I walked away and I quit. And I told one of the guys at The Simpsons, he said, "You ever going to work again?" I said, "I'll only work on a show where I like the show or a project where I like the show and I like the people and I don't have to be the boss and they'll do it on my schedule." And he said, "Well, good luck finding that." But sure enough, I've spent the last 25 years only doing that kind of job, like punching up animated movies. It's great, fun work. It's on my schedule. I've and I've written all these children's books where I don't have to take notes from anybody. I write the book. They're short. I can make it as good as I want, and then they can buy it or they don't have to buy it. But it's not some long, drawn out development process. So there is, and plays are like that too. I'll tell you an amazing thing about plays is unlike TV and certainly unlike movies, They never change a word of your play. They won't do anything. So I had this one play where it was about an old dramatic actress and an old comedian in a nursing home together. And the actress had the line, "Oh, I just saw Robin Williams today." And we were going to perform that show the day Robin Williams killed himself. So the actress came up to me. It was Joyce DeWitt from Three's Company, just to give it a little color. And she said to me, "Could I change the line to, I saw Robin Williams yesterday?" And I said, "No, change the line to, I saw any other comedian who didn't commit suicide today." But she was so deferential about it.
Plays, yeah. People have to stay on book. This is what is in the book. You cannot change what's in the book.
Oh, yeah. Let me get the one more story out, and then I won't bother
You can tell as many
anymore.
stories as you
Any
want. I
more
like the
tales of my
story.
theater life, which was I wrote another play where it had a tough talking Boston guy in it, and he gives a little speech about, in Boston we call ice cream sprinkles Jimmy's. Who the hell is Jimmy? And I would go see the show every night, and every night the guy would say, "Who's the hell is Jimmy?" And I liked it. I said, "Gee, that's character. You would never write a line like that." And I let him do it every night. And it was only when the play closed, I looked at the script again and saw, oh, it's a typo.
I thought he was adding a wonderful little accent to that word.
Yeah. Oh, that's how they talk in Boston.
That's how they talk. Who's this Jimmy's guy? What's going on? That's great. That's hilarious. You've written from incredible. So you were at the Harvard Lampoon, and then they hired you right out of college to National Lampoon, where
Right.
you had met your writing partner in college, Al Jean.
Yeah.
And you guys were college friends. Is that where you guys first met? Was it like immediately in college you gravitated towards the Harvard Lampoon and then became friends, or were you friends before the Harvard Lampoon and then you like went to the club together?
It was freshman week of college, and I was sitting in my dorm room, and my other roommate had brought in a big rocking chair, and Al Jean is just walking by the room and the door's open, and Al was 16. He was just a kid. He had skipped 2 grades because he's such a genius. And he sees the rocking chair and he goes, "Can I rock in your chair?" And I go, "Okay." So this stranger walks into my room and rocks for a while. And that's how I met Al. And, he's been rocking ever since. He likes rocking chairs. And for his birthday once, I built him a rocking chair and he rocked it to pieces within 3 weeks. He had just totally annihilated the thing. So, that's his worst vice. That's why he's had such a long career.
He
Is
keeps on having to buy new rocking chairs.
right. That's what keeps him working. I need another
I
chair.
need another rocking chair. So you guys worked in college. You're at the Harvard Lampoon. You're in that castle, doing whatever the secret things in the Harvard Lampoon they do, and they're making their funny. They're doing their parodies. What was a big article that you can remember from your Harvard Lampoon days that you look back on? And you're like, that was a really funny article. That may have been the funniest thing I've ever written. That thing at the Harvard Lampoon.
It was funny. It was very collegiate, very Ivy League kind of piece to write, but it was I wrote a piece called Samuel Johnson's Party Jokes. And it was the idea. I was taking a course in Samuel Johnson, not that I ever went. I never went to the class, and the final was coming up, and I still thought Samuel Johnson had invented the steamboat or something. So I was in big trouble. But if you take a course in Samuel Johnson, they'll just tell you all the great witticisms he made and listen to this anecdote and blah blah blah, and none of them are funny. And so for some reason I wrote Samuel Johnson's Party Jokes as if it was a Playboy feature. Again, this really dates it. There used to be a thing called Playboy magazine, and, and they had a page of dirty jokes. And so that was the piece, as if Samuel Johnson had written that once. Party jokes. And
Can you remember a single Samuel Johnson party joke?
it's, let me see. It was Samuel Johnson's recounting, I had lunch with the great architect, Sir Christopher Wren, and he mentioned that he has many great and beautiful erections. And and my hostess, Mrs. Thrale, gazed longingly at his crotch and said, I must agree.
It's great.
Highbrow, lowbrow. It's a real
Great.
formula. But
That's
anyway,
great.
it doesn't sound like much and it's aged terribly, but it was really good at the time. I was quite proud of that.
I think Samuel Johnson jokes about architecture and erections is a timeless classic. I don't think you can time out of that.
What I like about the joke, and I mean this is part of the theory, is you see the punchline coming about 14 miles away. Everyone's so far ahead of it. It would also be when you hear those great stories of some great witticism, you're thinking, well, I would have said that too. Someone just gave him such a fat setup somewhere.
Yeah, someone really lobbed that up for them to dunk, like they got set up pretty good. It's the
Winston
guy
Churchill.
that
Oh, if I were your wife, I would give you poison. It's like, who would say that? That didn't happen.
So you're putting out the Harvard Lampoon, and at that time, and I don't know the publication schedule for the Harvard Lampoon is it early 1980s?
It is, yeah, 1978 to 81. And
And they're putting out a magazine. Is it every quarter? Is it every month?
they put out 5 a year,
Okay.
and they never are on time. They've never hit their schedule. And the magazine is free to all the students, and still the students hate it. They really object to it. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, the Harvard Lampoon has produced by this point, over 100, maybe a couple hundred very successful, very talented comedy writers. Half the staff of The Simpsons, the entire staff of Futurama, the head writers at every single late night show on TV. All this talent comes out of there, and yet the magazine's terrible. It's never been funny. I've read it back to 1876 when it began. It wasn't funny then. It wasn't funny when I ran the magazine.
But you know what they are, Mike?
What are they?
Consistent. They're consistent.
Consistent. What they are is free. But it's just amazing. I mean, it stays terrible. And the other funny thing is, it still looks terrible. I mean, it looks bad. It looked bad back in the pre-computer day when we were just kind of literally pasting it up and cutting it with X-Acto knives. But now they have all these high-tech tools, and it still kind of looks like a monthly ransom note or something. Just awful.
Well, I think maybe by keeping the bar as low as possible, you really help the creative mind grow, right? So they don't have any stress to worry about being as good as the next issue.
Yes.
Because they didn't build up themselves a problem where they have to live in someone else's shadow of success.
It's so true. You go back because you can look at the old issues written by Doug Kenny from National Lampoon or John Updike. He's president of the Lampoon. Still terrible. Doug Kenny, you don't see any glimmer of how talented that guy would be if you read his college stuff.
And that's the good thing about what you do in college is it doesn't have to be very good. You just kind of learn how the pieces work, and then you go and do a good job for someone else later on. And the stuff you did in college, because you don't want to peak in college, Mike. So then, because then your career doesn't go anywhere. So people, they actively work at being not super, because you don't want to, there's so many people I'm sure that you have at the Harvard Lampoon that you don't want to have to compete with everybody. So everyone kind of maybe does their own thing. Though, I mean, the party jokes thing was, I think, very funny. And I think what kind of was the motivator for Doug Kenny and Robert Hoffman and when they got out, it was because of the magazine parodies, I believe, where they got like a national audience to do real publications of the parodies of Playboy and Time and all those things. And that's sort of what turned into, I think they did like a one-off national spoof or something like that.
Yes,
And
this
then,
gets even more into the details, but I guess this is a comedy podcast.
yeah,
Maybe someone will be interested, which is the magazine, the Harvard Lampoon magazine would suck, 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 suck. And then they would do a summer project where they put out something that people would actually have to pay for. And they would do a parody of Time magazine that would go, be nationally distributed. They did Time, they did People, which was a fantastic parody. When they did these projects for pay, they were great. They were great and funny, and everyone brought their best game. And I think that is sort of a way how everyone wound up in TV, was knowing, all right, if people are paying you, you better be good. If they're not paying you, you can be an artist.
exactly. Exactly. You have the freedom as long as there's no one holding you accountable for anything that they have bought and they're angry about and they want their money back. And then when someone actually pays for it, that's when you put in the good stuff. And maybe that's a good lesson for comedy writers.
It's
I
a good
mean,
one. You suddenly realize, oh, gee, that's how the world works. That's why there are 5 million podcasts. Did you know that? There are I do a podcast, you probably do 8 podcasts, but there are 5 million podcasts out there. There is a Chicago of podcasts out there. And why? Because nobody pays for them.
that's right. Speaking of podcasts that nobody pays for, Mike's podcast, What Am I Doing Here with Mike Reiss, is available now. And we can talk about your podcast real quick. This is a good segue. This
Yeah.
is a nice picture. Tell me who this is by. Who's the artist?
The artist is Seth Feinberg, and he is a cartoonist and especially a brilliant animator. And the work, even though I'm proud of The Simpsons, obviously, and The Critic, the work I'm proudest of is the work I did with Seth Feinberg. Again, for free. We might have gotten a little money, but I did a cartoon with him for the web in the very early days of the internet called Hard Drinkin' Lincoln. And I'm not proud to say Hard Drinkin' Lincoln was something I guess I did when I was about 40 years old, which I had actually written when I was 15. I just found it in my old notebooks of ideas. I go, all right, this will do. And so I did a Hard Drinkin' Lincoln with him. And then I followed it up with the cartoon that I'm prouder of than anything else I've done, called Queer Duck. And it was about a gay duck and his gay animal friends, Openly Gator and Bipolar Bear. And you can see the Queer Duck cartoons on YouTube. And at the time, they were groundbreaking. I mean, I did this thing because I said, gee, there's nothing for a gay audience out there. No cartoons. I wanted to create like a gay Bugs Bunny where his Elmer Fudd was kind of a straight conservative guy. And I'm not gay. And I sort of said, and it's the kind of thing I would not be allowed to do anymore. But
Right.
but at the time, I just asked permission of this internet company if I could do it, and I put out Queer Duck, and it was this instant phenomenon. It's hard to remember what the net was like in the year 2000, but this thing came on the Icebox website. It was called icebox.com, and it crashed the site immediately and just kept staying huge. And within 2 days of this cartoon coming on the air, a reporter flew in from Germany to meet me. That's how big and how fast this thing took off. And I stayed in the closet as a straight man for a year and a half. I was doing this thing and would not admit I was straight. And reporters would come to the house, and I had to hide my wedding photos.
Because everyone assumed that you were
Everyone
gay.
assumed I was
because
gay,
you made-
and they were loving it. And I didn't want people to suddenly go, "Oh wait, he's straight. He must be making fun of us," which again,
Right.
I think would be the perception today. So
You were kind of living a realistic version of Three's Company for a bit there, Mike. You
oh my
were.
gosh, yes, I was.
You were sort of Jack Trippering yourself into the being allowed to live there, and Mr. Furley or Mr. Roper's like, what? What? This is allowed, but only if you're gay.
I
And you're
like
like,
this.
yes, sir.
We're at the 25-minute mark, and this is our second Three's Company reference at Joyce DeWitt. So this is a show, by the way, I've never seen one episode of.
You've never seen Three's Company?
No, is it
Oh my
awesome?
God. I loved Three's Company, Mike.
Okay.
Oh my God. We have the Regal Beagle. We've got Larry, the best friend who's total skis bag. I think he's like an airline pilot. So he's always bagging chicks down at the Regal Beagle. Jack is a chef.
Okay.
But you know, he's very good chef, but he's very, I don't know, very flighty. But he's living with these two girls. I guess they're in San Diego. I don't know if it's in Los Angeles or not. But I used to watch that show on reruns all the time growing up because it was great physical comedy. And I thought it was so funny. They had this door in the kitchen that swung both ways. So he was constantly getting hit in the face with this door. Oh, comedy. TV comedy where people are getting hit in the face with the door. Hilarious. And misunderstandings galore.
Wow. No, you don't get that on TV.
You do not. It's like farce. You know, it's kind of like, I really like, for some reason, I really gravitated towards like Clue, Three Stooges, Charlie Chaplin. Like, I like really old stuff, like silent film comedy.
Yeah.
And then stuff that still did the physical comedy in modern day. I thought was always so amazing because it seems so hard, you know. It's like acrobatic, the kind of timing people needed to be funny, but then also not really hurt themselves.
Correct.
I thought that was amazing. Like, there's so many TV shows where you're just like, how do they do that? That's so hard. But talking about Queer Duck, that got picked up by Showtime, and then they ran it against Queer as Folk, and then it had a movie.
We made a movie.
Queer Duck, the movie that came out. And I mean, that's huge. How something that started as a little web thing at the dawn of the internet for Flash video.
Correct.
Went and did that. And then while you're doing that stuff, you're also a writer on The Simpsons. You had already done The Critic. And then previous to all of those things, you wrote on Johnny Carson.
I did.
You wrote on Sledgehammer. You wrote on Alf. And then you have a funny, embarrassing story about a short stint on the television show 9 to 5, which is a TV show based on the movie 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton and Jane Fonda, right?
Are we
Lily Tomlin?
That? Is it story time?
I'd love to hear a story about old-time TV writing.
For my podcast, we showed the art and then went off on a complete tangent, but let's just make sure we come back to that. So can I tell a 5-minute anecdote?
Yes.
7-minute, because it's free. So I'm going to, instead of telling two cringy stories, I'm going to tell one long kind of epic cringe. And it was nice when you asked for this. I go, I don't really have them. And I was asking my wife, what do I have that I'm really embarrassed by? And, you know, I have stories like that, but they're just awful. You know, they're just like, asking my friend, oh, how's your mother? Oh, she died, right? But, you know, that's not a story.
That's daily. You know, that's daily stuff.
We've all done that, and why is that an anecdote? But let me just tell you about, I'll just back it all the way up because it starts with National Lampoon, and you seem to like that stuff. So Al Jean and I, it's 1981, are working at National Lampoon, and our boss assigns us an article. He said, I want you to do a parody of Indiana Jones, which had just come out. Do a parody of Indiana Jones, but instead of being an archaeologist, he's a gynecologist. And instead of a whip, he's got a speculum. And Al and I don't even know I still don't know what a speculum is, but that was the assignment.
Who is the editor that gave you this assignment?
I hate to say it because he comes up so badly in this story, but it's Jerry Sussman, who was very sweet man. He ran National Lampoon for a couple of years. He was their most prolific writer ever. I'll tell you, here's a terrible story, which is Jerry Sussman. He was really small. I mean, he was about 5'1", and he died at a very young age, maybe 50 or something. He died from asthma because a cat walked into the room. And so somebody called me, Jerry Sussman died. And I said, what killed him? And he said, a cat. And because he was so small, I said, did it eat him? So not a great story. But so Jerry Sussman had to sign this article, and Al and I are sitting down on a weekend to try and write this piece about Indiana Jones as a gynecologist. And so we get one joke. Okay, instead of the big ball rolling at Indiana Jones, it's a boo. We got that. And instead of Indiana Jones, his name was Indy Pants Bones. So already, by joke 2, it's awful. And we can't think of joke 3. We cannot think of one other funny thing on this topic. And we start fighting. And Al and I fought more that afternoon than we did in the subsequent 40 years we've worked together. That was such a terrible day for us. And then we get a call from Hollywood to say, you want to come out and work on this movie? We need you tomorrow. And we said, yeah. And it wasn't that we wanted to go to Hollywood or work in the movies. I was so happy. I love my job here in New York. I love my apartment. But I just didn't want to write Indiana Jones as the gynecologist.
You're like, this is my out from this assignment.
I didn't even
this assignment
was. Yeah.
Anyone could have called you at that point, and you would have been like, I will absolutely do this offer if it gets me out of writing this one thing.
That's right. We've got some sort of giant lizard in the sewer. Do you want to fight it with a matchstick? Yes. So anyway, we walk into work the next day, and it was so sad because the owner or the manager of National Lampoon, Julian Weber, came to our office that day just to say, boys, I never say it enough. I want to tell you what a great job you're doing. And we said, well, we're quitting. When? Right now. And we walked out. It's such a dick move. I mean, this is an embarrassing story. We go back to our apartment. We were sharing this big, beautiful loft in New York, and we just ran out on our lease. And again, everyone's being so nice, and the landlady said, don't worry about it. I'll send all your stuff out to you. And that was it. We go out to Hollywood, and the next day we're on the set of a movie you may have heard of. It is called Airplane.
Wow.
2. Airplane 2. Airplane 2, a comedy so bad it won an award in France. And we're working on Airplane 2, and the guy, the boss, the writer-director, Ken Finkelman, is working us so hard. We're working day and night on the movie, and he actually moved us into his house so we could work 24 hours a day on this project. And our landlady has not sent any of our stuff out. So I literally had to go to the Paramount Studio store every day at lunch to buy socks and underwear. I had no clothes. And when finally it happened, I write to the landlady, what happened? Where's our stuff? And what she had done is she had boxed all our stuff up and put it out in the hallway of the apartment building. And then, this is 1981 New York. And then her son got shot in the penis on Coney Island. And so that distracted her. Suddenly our stuff was not her big priority.
Her son's stuff was more of a priority.
The son got shot.
Or the stuff that got shot off.
So she said, well, so I didn't get around to it for a few months, and everything got stolen. Everything we owned was stolen except this. She sent us one giant box of stuff, and it was full of winter coats.
Perfect for sunny Los Angeles.
Right. So anyway, that's preamble. That's the first story, just about what a bad thing we did and how we were punished. And the punishment was we lost everything we had in the world. And now we're living in LA. We have no job. We have no friends. And it was just lonely and terrible. And it's like 1982, 83. And you have to put yourself in the mindset. There was no internet then. There was
Right.
no there were no DVDs, there was no VCRs. All we had to get us through the day was what's on TV right now. You just sat and watched the best thing that was on, maybe 20 channels of TV. So what got me through this long stretch with just nobody in the world was watching this show 9 to 5. There was a sitcom 9 to 5, and it was literally the worst thing I had ever seen in my life. Now, you'd remember the movie 9 to 5. It was a pretty good movie.
9 to 5, for people that don't know this movie, it's Dolly Parton as a secretary. It's Lily Tomlin as a secretary. And then there was a third woman. Was it Jane Fonda? Okay, I was right. And Dabney Coleman is the guy, right?
Right. He's the villainous boss.
He's the villainous boss, and they decide to. And I remember they tied him up, and they gagged him and stuff.
Yeah.
And the movie is them taking over the business, and then but they don't kill him. They just kind of tie him up.
They kidnap him, I think, and keep him in their garage. Again, it's probably a movie does not stand up well to repeated viewing because it was about women's empowerment where they kidnap him and truss him up like terrorists so they can put in a daycare center at their office.
Right.
But big hit movie, and at the time it was genuinely kind of entertaining and upbeat.
It had Dolly Parton, and it had a hit song, 9 to 5, which everybody knows.
Right.
So then they do a TV show based on this movie.
Right.
Which is a sitcom.
So instead of Jane Fonda, they had Rita Moreno. And Rita Moreno, okay, big star. And by the way, this is the first time I wanted to say this for years because Rita Moreno, I think it's 91. She's a national treasure. She's going to go soon, and there'll be an outpouring of sympathy. She's a horrible person. She's one of the worst people I ever worked with. And I want that out there. I just, people can revere her career, but don't Betty White her because she's a bad, bad lady. So we had Rita Moreno. Great. Rita Moreno. Instead of Dolly Parton, we had Dolly Parton's first cousin, who was not an actress. She just was Dolly's cousin. And then instead of Lily Tomlin, we had a Hairspray model. That was the cast of the show. And again, this was the original hate watching. I'd watch it every night, every Wednesday night at 9:30, and I would go buy a quart of beer special. Just that was my viewing 9 to 5 beer. And this was like my church. This got me through the week. And then one day I get a call. Hey, this is 9 to 5. We're looking for writers. Would you like to come in? Oh, yes. So I come in for a meeting with the worst show I've ever seen in my life. And they started explaining to me, well, it's a show about 3 women who live together and they work in a factory that makes slotted spoons. And I go, yeah, and they share an apartment and the son sleeps on a shelf over the sink. And I start talking and they go, you watch our show?
You're the one.
That was it. I go, I watch your show every week. And they go, you're hired. So I got hired off of that. It was such a lucky break. And the amazing thing about TV is there are some, you see terrible shows like that on the air, and you assume the writers are a bunch of morons and drunks and stuff. And then you go in very smart, witty people. There were one guy who worked on the show was literally the funniest man I ever met in my life. A guy named George Bloom, who just spoke in jokes. Everything that came out of him was a joke. So I'm working on 9 to 5, and Al and I think we're doing pretty well on this terrible, terrible show. And then we have a tape night that goes to midnight on a Friday, and they tell Al and me, we want to meet with you after tape night. And Al said, I think it's bad news. And I go, it's going to be great news. They would never tell us bad news Friday at midnight. How cruel are they? I don't know if it's a raise or a promotion, but they love us here. So we go in for the meeting Friday at midnight, and they fired us. And that was it. It was like a 13-week contract, and they fired us after 9 weeks. So they didn't even want us around for the last 4 weeks. It was like, and then we were still getting paid, but they didn't.
They're like, we want to pay you to not write for the show for a
That's
couple of weeks.
right. And that was it. We got fired off of the worst show I ever
Did
saw.
they give you any criticism, like feedback, reason? We just don't like the jokes aren't landing for the 9 to 5 audience.
They said you're quiet in the room. We were quite, a big part of the job is pitching jokes in the room, and we were a little quiet. It was our first job, and I know part of it, I think, was we were really kind of stunned how bad the show was, how bad it was coming out. It's like, we need a joke for this idiotic situation, and we would just sit there stunned. You didn't want to contribute to be a part of it. What I've learned subsequently, because seeing other shows, the show was in trouble.
Yeah.
The show was in big trouble. ABC hated it, and they said, do something. So they fired us. They fired 2 other writers that night too. And so they fired half the staff, and it was just a big show. And it is one thing you do. If they tell you fire someone, you fire the new guys immediately. Yeah. That was the rule at Carson too, was fire the new guys. And
so from 9 to 5, you and Al, is that when you get the gig at Carson?
No. I think we had been at Carson already.
Okay.
We were on a show, an award-winning show, nobody remembers, an award-winning cable show called Not Necessarily the News.
Oh, I love Not Necessarily the News. Wow, Mike, that is an amazing show to be on.
And it's funny, it was all topical humor, but you can see these on YouTube, and I could not believe it holds up. You're actually it's amazing, this super fast-paced show. It was around the time of the birth of MTV, and it was, let's do the news. Let's do Weekend Update in an MTV video style, and it's fast-paced.
The guy that was the anchor, he was a kind of a larger guy with brown hair who was very funny. What was his name?
Stuart Pankin, very, very funny guy. Rich Hall, the comedian, was on the show.
Rich Hall.
They would give him, 5 minutes a week to do whatever he wanted, do brilliant stuff. It was a really good show. So that was the show. I think we learned nothing from the National Lampoon story, because we were working at Not Necessarily the News. They loved us there. And then we get the call, we want you to do 9 to 5. And our agent is saying, you got to be on a sitcom. This won't get you anywhere. So we walked out of Not Necessarily the News. We walked out of a contract. They were shocked. Then we get fired, 9 weeks later. And we just said, can we come back to Not Necessarily the News? And they said yes. And so by getting fired for those 4 weeks we were supposed to be at 9 to 5, we're actually collecting 2 paychecks. We're getting Not the News and 9 to 5. And of course, at the end of the 13 weeks, they canceled 9 to 5 too. Yeah. So all those people who fired us, they got fired too, and they deserved it. They did such a bad job. And then about 3 years after that, I'm running The Simpsons. It's the biggest hit in the land. And the woman who fired me calls me up and said, I have a writer I want to recommend. I think you'll really like him. And I'm thinking, well, you sure have excellent taste. I mean, our bond is you fired me, and now you're recommending a writer.
So you were at The Simpsons. I remember when The Simpsons was on the Tracy Ullman show as a short bit thing. They added The Simpsons. It was like it was a short, right, within a larger show on Fox called the Tracy Ullman Show, which was a great sketch comedy show. And then they decided to do The Simpsons spinoff. At what point did you join that team? Did you do any of the writing when they first were doing the shorts,
No,
or did you join when it became a show?
no, I joined when it became a show. And this is something I didn't remember this. I was talking to Mark Flanagan, one of the writers for Tracy Ullman Show. The Tracy Ullman Show, it was, I think, 3 sketches a week, and they all starred Tracy Ullman. And people got confused. Is it just one long sketch? I keep seeing this woman. So they needed something to break up the sketches. And they originally had like circus acts. You'd see some sophisticated comedy, and then a juggler, and then an acrobat, and that wasn't working. So they said, let's try putting cartoons in. And this is a great story but I know a lot of people may know it. So they said, let's try cartoons. And they went with a cartoonist. And this is a terrible thing they did to her. It was a well-known National Lampoon cartoonist. I'll even say it was M.K. Brown, Mary Kay Brown.
Yep.
They went to her, said, can you do animated interstitials? And she said, what do you want? They said, they don't have to be funny. So they weren't funny. She made her crazy, surrealistic art cartoons, and they put them on, and then they go, well, these aren't funny. So they fired her. It's a real shame. But then they go to Matt Groening. Matt Groening had been a very popular underground cartoonist in LA at that time. He did a cartoon called Life in Hell for the LA Weekly.
Yeah, and that's when they had the bunny with the one ear.
Right.
Right.
There are bunnies with 2 ears and bunnies with 1 ear. And
right.
A baby with 1 ear, which it plays into an anecdote we may or may not have time for. But anyway, so they call in Matt Groening. This is the kind of thing they do in Hollywood all the time. His agent said, they just want to meet you. It's just a meet and greet. So he comes in for the meeting, and 5 minutes before the meeting, someone leans out the door and says, we're very excited to hear about your new project. And he didn't have a new project. So in 5 minutes, he created The Simpsons. He drew them out and created the show. And that's what he walked in with, 5 minutes. And there's a piece of paper somewhere, and I know who has it, but it's not Matt Groening, that contains that first drawing of The Simpsons, the first ever.
That's incredible.
It's just on a legal pad somewhere. But that's where The Simpsons came from. They were these 1 minute interstitials on the show. And then they found out that the audiences loved the 3 minutes of Simpsons more than the 27 minutes of Tracy Ullman they were getting.
It's true. That is kind of what happened. It was like they used the Simpsons got to use Tracy Ullman as a launch pad to like test out something cool, and everyone's like, we really like this Simpsons thing. Yeah. And I remember, and you may have told me a story about this, but I remember the first Simpsons for the broadcast was the Christmas episode, because they made it into a Christmas special, and that's how they launched the Simpsons as their own show. But I think you told me that originally that was supposed to be like episode 10 or something. 9.
Yeah, it's supposed to be episode 9. Yeah, it was David Silverman who was animating these shorts, said to Jim Brooks, maybe they should be their own show. And there hadn't been animation in prime time for 30 years, not since the Flintstones, and nobody did it. And the other thing is very hard to get in this mindset. We're now we're all the way up to 1988, where cartoons had a terrible reputation. They were just Saturday morning crap that was cranked out as filler. Adults did not go see Disney cartoons. And Disney was was really making junk by that point. And it was all just kid stuff. So the idea of doing an anime show for adults was just crazy. And so they're turning The Simpsons into a half-hour show. I know a lot of reputable writers turned down the job, and they came to me because a couple of friends of mine had turned the job down and recommended me. And I was on a summer break from It's Gary Shandling show. And
another amazing show.
It was a great show. And that was it. And it was funny. The It's Gary Shandling show, the next to the lowest rated show on TV, Tracy Ullman Show, the lowest rated show on TV. And somehow all these pieces came together to make The Simpsons. But that was it. And so we wound up doing The Simpsons as a summer job with a bunch of guys who'd never written a TV script in their lives. Six of the 8 writers had never written a full TV script. They were joke writers and sketch writers. John Swartzwelder, who went on to write 59 episodes of the show, he was an advertising writer. So it was just amazing. That's where it came from.
That's incredible. So you worked at Alf for a little while. How long did you work at Alf for?
I worked at Alf for 1 year, and I loved it. I loved the job. It was a really fun environment, but I quit that too. We felt we were entitled to a promotion, and we didn't get it, so we went over to Gary Shandling.
Just living that Hollywood comedy writer 80s and 90s life.
You know, it's funny because you introduced me as this nice man. I like it. I pride myself. I don't think I'm that funny or talented. Like, yeah, I'm a nice guy, but I've been a total dick in my career, walking out on one contract after another.
You have. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And throughout this very long career you've had, you have started doing a lot more amazing traveling, because I want to talk about the podcast.
Okay.
It is called What Am I Doing Here? And I have the art for it right here by Seth. What Am I Doing Here with Mike Reiss? And it's you and Denise, your wife, and you go on all of these amazing adventures, these incredible vacations, where you have these amazing encounters, and you are just immersing yourself in culture and stuff. So tell me about when you started doing these big vacations. What started this, and how often you go, and where have you been going, and what the podcast is like, and why people should definitely go listen to it, because I listened to it. It's so funny. It's a great podcast. It's like I went on the vacation. I don't have to go to Antarctica because I listened to Mike go and have misadventures there already. So tell me all about the wonderful podcast.
Yes. All right. Well, I'll get to the very start of it, which was when I was dating my wife. One thing I loved about her was she seemed like the most sedentary person in the world. We just, our dating was we'd sit in front of the TV all weekend and just watch TV. And I go, wow, I found a woman who likes to do what I like. And we got married, and we were married for 5 years, and I was working so hard at The Simpsons, at Sledgehammer, and a couple of Gary Shandling, just long hour jobs. So we never had a honeymoon, and we'd never taken a trip before. And finally, 5 years into our marriage, we had time for a honeymoon. And this is where I found out. I said to my wife, I offered her a range of possibilities from Disneyland to Disney World. And she said, gee, I was thinking more of Yemen or Siberia. And I said, well, honey, those are places people want to get out of. But that's what she was thinking. She was trying to take me to Yemen on my honeymoon. And I said, I haven't even been to London yet. And so, but that was it. My wife, as a girl with her mom, traveled everywhere. And they didn't have a lot of money, but these were the days of super cheap travel. And she went around the world twice, and she's been to places you can't go anymore, like Afghanistan. And so we started traveling, and we traveled, and it makes her really happy. And I can't say I like to do that. I would still rather be home watching TV, but she brings me to places we've been, just so people know what we're talking about. I've been to Iran and Iraq and Libya. I've been to North Korea. I've been to the North Pole and the South Pole, and I climbed on Kilimanjaro, and we took a submarine down to see the Titanic 2 miles deep. And then our next vacation coming up just next week, Easter is around the corner. So we're going to the Philippines to watch guys crucify themselves. So this is my life.
And you document it very well, and you have incredible stories of all the misadventures that you would probably have in Times Square just existing. Like wherever Mike Reiss goes, he finds himself in little situations where maybe he's getting himself into a little bit of trouble. And I remember you telling me a story where you got yourself into a little bit of trouble. It was on like a ship, on like a cruise ship, where you got stuck with the people for the entire thing. Like you gave a talk and you were like, oh God, now I gotta get some. And then these people were with you the entire rest of the way.
Correct. Yeah, that was something that was we were on a cruise ship to Antarctica, and they had joke night. It was tell a joke night. You know, they're doing anything to kill time. And people get up, you know, these are respectable people that have money to take an Antarctica cruise. And they get one by one telling the most sexist, the most racist jokes, and everything's killing. Everything's getting a laugh. And then I'm ready to go up. And because I'm Mr. Professional Comedy Writer, and I've lectured all over the world, and I have 20 minutes of material that has never failed in over a dozen countries. And I get up and I start doing this material, and it's dying. And it bombs, and one joke after another bombs. And I'm doing the sweaty comic trick of I won't stop till I get a laugh. And well, I mean, the audience is just going, what is wrong with this guy? And I keep going and going. And literally, it was just supposed to be tell a joke night. And I'm 20 minutes into my A material, and nothing's working. And I just sort of walk off, sadly. And the big problem was, this was not like I was doing this at the public library. I was doing it on a cruise ship at the start of a cruise, and I am stuck with these 200 people for the next week and a half. And everywhere I go, people are avoiding me. People are averting their eyes. Everyone's just pretending they don't know me. So that was bad. It's a bad place to bomb.
It is a bad place to bomb, where you have to see people for the rest of the cruise. Or, you know, you might end up being on a cruise ship, like maybe you're like the last ship, and all of a sudden it's like civilization ends or something, or all those people that got trapped on boats during the pandemic and they couldn't go into a port, and they just get stuck with these people forever. Like, that sounds like something that would happen to you. Like, you would have been on a boat, you would have bombed on something, you would be avoiding people. You're like, well, at least I can get off this boat in 2 days. And then they're like, attention passengers, we will be on this boat indefinitely. You're like, son of a bitch.
I have a weird story. It's an anecdote with no real punchline, partly because we're living it. We're right in the middle of it. We had a house guest with us last week, and he was telling us about a 94-day cruise he was about to get on. And I said, well, if you're taking a 94-day cruise, you should look at this. And I pulled up an article. It was all over the papers a couple of months ago. A 3-year cruise. A 3-year cruise goes to every country on earth you can visit with a boat. So it's 135 countries, 3 years. And I expect him just to be amused by the article. He goes to the guest room, and he comes back. Well, I put down my down payment. I go, what? And he goes, I think you should come with me. We'll split the time on the boat. You know, we'll each take 18 months. And my wife, of course, because it's a terrible idea, is go, yeah. So
you're time sharing a sea cabin.
A boat. And then he goes to the guest room again and comes back. No, instead of splitting one room, we'll get 3 rooms. Then we can each have our own room and have a 3rd room for guests. And it's like, what? You know?
These people on their cruises, Mike. People get into cruises. I saw a thing, and it was basically sell your house, and it was like $50,000 a year to live on a cruise ship.
Right.
And that's it.
This is 60 grand a year for the 2 of us to live on a boat, free food, wine with dinner, laundry.
Yeah.
So So I keep telling my wife, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. And I think she's getting the message, but then we're out with people and they say, what happened with the cruise? We're thinking about it. Like, I know how it works, and I know I will be on this 3-year cruise starting in November. So we only have
No way. Are you really going to be on a 3-year cruise?
well, we'll see. I keep saying no, but that doesn't work.
I'll visit you at New York Harbor at the port. We
That's
can,
it,
we can say hello.
Anywhere, maybe I'll buy that guest room. You can fly into Mogadishu and ride with us for a couple of weeks.
Oh my God.
But anyway,
let's talk about the podcast is What Am I Doing Here? And people should go listen to it. And we're going to be turning that into a travel log book because the writing and material that you're getting from these travels is just insanely funny.
Yes, it's only funny stories from travel, mostly disastrous vacations. It's only 15 minutes, and it's scripted. It's not like this. It's written and
it can't go off the rails immediately like a podcast can.
So I give it a listen.
Give it a listen, and also pick up Mike's books because his books are wonderful. He has many books. How many children's books have you written at this point?
That's number 21.
So number 21 right here. This is Santa's Brother Sandy Saves Christmas, written by you, illustrated by Jason Chatfield, who's a fantastic illustrator. He does a lot of stuff for Mad when they were around and the New Yorker currently. But you should go pick up this now. You can get this at Amazon or on Bookshop or wherever you want to go to buy your books. But it's a wonderful story about Santa's lazy brother Sandy, and he saves Christmas. And it's great. And I love it. And hopefully we're gonna do more. We have to do some follow-ups. We're gonna have many times with this character of Sandy, I think.
I would love to do it. It's for children and Jimmy Buffett fans, which
definitely Jimmy Buffett fans.
So
I want you to be able to continue on with your life, so I won't hold you here all day. People should follow you on Twitter because you tweet all the time and you're very funny on Twitter. Even though Twitter's become this like hellhole of just like chaos and anarchy. But follow Mike at Mike Reiss Writer on Twitter.
Correct. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow me. That stuff is free. Listen to the podcast. Buy my books. Watch The Simpsons. We're doing some good shows these days.
Still at The Simpsons. Still working hard. Still coming out.
Yesterday.
Before I go, what was your absolute favorite? What was your favorite episode to write of The Simpsons? What's your top? You can say top 5 if you have to. But what are your top 5 Simpsons from your 35-year time there?
Well, that's it. I always say I've worked there 35 years, but I took off 2 years in the middle. I told a story about when I sort of thought I was retiring, and it's the only 2 years where I could go home on Sunday nights and watch The Simpsons and not know what was coming. And I really loved it. I go, hey, this show, not only is the show good, it seems to be much better without me. So it's season 6 and 7, which I had nothing to do with, are so funny and great, and especially the Halloween show. So when people always say, why is The Simpsons going downhill? Well, I'm the reason. Clearly.
You are the reason.
Yes. So
the Halloween episodes are always great. I love the Halloween episodes. The Treehouse of Horrors are always hilarious.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mike. And then what's the next stop? What's the next vacation?
Philippine crucifixions.
Philippine crucifixions, everybody, for Easter. Yeah. So be following Mike on Twitter. I'm sure you'll be tweeting a photo, hopefully, of something you see there. I'm pretty sure you will.
I'm hoping they do something newsworthy.
So we'll check out some Philippine crucifixions. Good luck with your big trip. Thank you so much for being on Talkward. Everyone follow Mike on Twitter. Thank you for watching. Follow us at Talkward Podcast and subscribe to Weekly Humorist at Weekly Humorist. Thanks so much, Mike. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.